Imagine this: every day, you're exposed to over 5,000 ads, social media posts, and pieces of information designed to influence your decisions. Most people don't realize how powerful propaganda really is. From ancient rulers to modern tech giants, propaganda has shaped the course of history, molded societies, and influenced elections. Did you know that in the 20th century, the US government spent billions on propaganda campaigns during World War II to boost morale and recruit soldiers? Or that more than 80% of people can't spot fake news when it's shared on social media? What if I told you that many of the things you believe today were shaped by strategies that date back thousands of years? It's true. Propaganda is older than you might think, and its influence has only grown stronger over time. In this video, we'll uncover the hidden history of propaganda, from its earliest roots in ancient Egypt to its powerful role in today's digital age. You'll discover how leaders have used clever techniques to control what you think, feel, and believe. Stay with us as we dive into shocking facts and surprising strategies that have shaped not just politics, but the very way we see the world. Are you ready to learn how your mind has been shaped by centuries of carefully crafted messages? Let's get started. Chapter 1: The First Seeds. Propaganda in Ancient Civilizations. The history of propaganda stretches far back, even to ancient civilizations. Long before the rise of modern media, rulers used clever strategies to shape the way people thought and acted. In ancient Egypt, for example, pharaohs portrayed themselves as gods through monumental statues and grand temples, reinforcing their divine right to rule. These massive structures were not just architectural feats, they were messages, carefully crafted to create awe and obedience. In Rome, Augustus, the first emperor, understood the power of image. He used art and coinage to spread his vision of Rome's glory. Coins, often showing his face, helped solidify his image as the ultimate ruler. Roman emperors, like Augustus, carefully controlled how their subjects saw them, even rewriting history through architecture and public monuments. Similarly, in ancient Greece, leaders like Pericles used the arts and public speeches to inspire loyalty. The Parthenon, for instance, wasn't just a temple, it was a symbol of Athens' power and influence. Even the Athenian democracy, known for its participation, was steeped in propaganda. Leaders often used persuasive rhetoric in the agora to win over citizens. One of the oldest recorded uses of propaganda comes from the Sumerians. Around 2500 BCE, they used cylinder seals to spread royal messages. These seals, which were pressed into clay, showed the ruler as a larger-than-life figure in battle, helping establish authority. These simple tools had a profound impact on the public's perception of power and authority. The first recorded form of political communication in ancient civilizations relied on one crucial tactic: symbolism. Whether through monuments, coins, or stories, these leaders didn't just want to rule, they wanted to shape how history would remember them. The common people often had little access to alternative viewpoints, making these tactics incredibly effective. In these ancient societies, propaganda was almost exclusively controlled by those in power. It wasn't about spreading truth but about shaping a narrative that would keep people loyal and obedient. The techniques used by ancient leaders set the stage for the much more complex and widespread methods we see today. Chapter 2: The Art of Deception. The rise of political mythology. As time went on, the use of propaganda became more sophisticated. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, political leaders started to create myths around themselves. This wasn't just about controlling the present, it was about creating a legacy. The story of King Arthur, for example, was partly designed to strengthen the unity of Britain. Though much of it is now considered legend, it was intentionally crafted to build a national identity. In the Renaissance, rulers like Louis XIV of France used extravagant art to solidify their power. His palace, Versailles, wasn't just a royal residence, it was a grand statement of his authority. Everything from the architecture to the art was designed to demonstrate that he was not only a king but a monarch chosen by divine will. His image was carefully managed to portray an air of absolute power. The use of portraits also took off during this time. Kings and queens weren't just painted for posterity, they were depicted in ways that conveyed strength, wisdom, and control. Portraits often emphasized the leader's regal nature, making him appear both invincible and omnipotent. Queen Elizabeth I of England, for example, used her image to construct a narrative of invincibility, especially in the face of Spain's threat. In the 16th century, political propaganda took a darker turn with the use of religious mythology. The Catholic Church, with its enormous influence, began to use religious symbolism to support political power. For example, the Pope was often depicted as the direct representative of God on earth, elevating the Church's political role. By linking political power with divine approval, they created a narrative that challenged any opposition. Propaganda wasn't just about influencing the public's perception of living rulers, it was also about creating heroes and villains for future generations. Take the myth of Vlad the Impaler, who inspired the Dracula legend. While his brutal reign in the 15th century was marked by violence and cruelty, the myth of Dracula turned him into a figure that lived on for centuries, contributing to a larger narrative of Eastern European conflict. In many ways, political mythology was a way to ensure that the ruler's power lived beyond their lifetime. The stories became so ingrained in culture that the true intentions behind them were often forgotten, leaving only the legend. This practice helped ensure that even centuries after their reign, the influence of these rulers would still be felt. Chapter 3: Incan Influence, the Printing Press and the Birth of Mass Propaganda. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century was a game-changer for propaganda. Suddenly, ideas could be spread far and wide. The ability to print pamphlets, books, and posters made it easier than ever to influence public opinion. In fact, it could be argued that the Protestant Reformation would not have been possible without the printing press. Martin Luther, the German monk, used printed pamphlets to spread his critiques of the Catholic Church. His 95 Theses, famously nailed to the door of a church, were quickly printed and distributed across Europe. Luther's challenge to the church wasn't just theological, it was a well-executed propaganda campaign. His messages were accessible and designed to stir up public sentiment. Similarly, in England, the rise of pamphlets helped spread the ideas of the English Revolution. Pamphlets were the social media of the 17th century, offering space for debates and ideas to be shared, even if they were controversial. The mass production of printed materials meant that political ideas could be rapidly disseminated, influencing the course of revolutions and wars. The power of print also became evident during the French Revolution. Revolutionaries used printed materials to build a shared sense of purpose. Pamphlets and newspapers flooded Paris, spreading revolutionary ideas and stirring up public outrage against the monarchy. In fact, the revolution's success was in no small part due to the spread of these ideas. While print allowed for the spread of revolutionary ideas, it also served the interests of those in power. Monarchs and governments used the printing press to create controlled narratives. In France, Louis XIV's image as the Sun King was spread through official prints, reinforcing his divine right to rule. Printed portraits, showing him as the ruler of all, helped cement his image in the public's mind. This early form of mass media allowed rulers to manage public opinion on a larger scale than ever before. The press had the power to shape beliefs, influence politics, and manipulate how history was recorded. The printing press democratized propaganda, turning it into a tool not just for the elite, but for anyone with the means to print and distribute materials. The success of the printing press showed how easily public opinion could be molded when the right messages were presented in the right ways. Whether it was for revolution or the maintenance of power, the press made propaganda more powerful and more accessible to the masses. If you're enjoying this deep dive into propaganda's history, don't forget to subscribe for more insights into how the world's most powerful strategies have shaped our lives. Chapter 4: The Golden Age of Manipulation, Propaganda in the World Wars. The two world wars marked a new era for propaganda. With millions of lives at stake and the world's largest economies involved, the need for persuasion became more intense than ever. Propaganda was no longer just about manipulating the elite, it was about mobilizing entire nations. Governments used radio broadcasts, posters, and even films to sway public opinion and keep morale high during the wars. In World War I, one of the most effective tools was the poster. Iconic posters, like the famous "I Want You," featuring Uncle Sam, created a sense of urgency and duty. These posters encouraged people to enlist, ration goods, and support the war effort. In the United States alone, the government printed more than 20 million posters during the war. But it wasn't just about recruitment. Posters were also used to demonize the enemy. The Allies portrayed the Central Powers as monstrous figures. The Germans, for example, were often depicted as barbaric Huns, who needed to be stopped. This created a clear us versus them mentality that unified the public against a common enemy. In World War II, propaganda reached even greater heights. The invention of radio broadcasts allowed governments to reach vast numbers of people instantly. Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats became legendary, offering reassurance to Americans during uncertain times. His use of radio helped shape his image as a trustworthy leader. On the other side of the Atlantic, Nazi Germany perfected propaganda under Joseph Goebbels. The Ministry of Propaganda used films, radio, and mass rallies to promote the ideals of National Socialism. The 1935 film Triumph of the Will is a famous example. Directed by Leni Riefenstahl, it used stunning visuals to glorify Hitler and the Nazi regime, transforming their ideology into an almost religious experience. Britain also used radio effectively. The BBC broadcasted messages to occupied Europe, providing vital information that contrasted with Nazi propaganda. The Voice of Britain broadcast was used to uplift the spirits of the oppressed while undermining Nazi control. During both World Wars, propaganda took on a highly emotional appeal. Posters, films, and radio ads often depicted soldiers as heroes, urging citizens to support the war in any way they could. These tools created a collective mindset, where everyone, from the civilian to the soldier, had a role in achieving victory. But war propaganda wasn't just about rallying people to fight. It was also about controlling what they believed. The British Ministry of Information, for example, used propaganda to shape the public's view on food rationing, the need for censorship, and the importance of national unity. They even used propaganda to convince people that blackouts and bombings were signs of strength, not fear. Propaganda during the World Wars showed how deeply messages could penetrate society. It wasn't just about persuading individuals, it was about creating a unified vision of reality that served the interests of the state. The propaganda machines of these wars set the stage for even more complex and far-reaching campaigns in the future. Want more behind-the-scenes details on how propaganda shaped history? Hit subscribe and stay tuned for the next chapters. Chapter 5: The Cold War Mind Games, the Battle for Hearts and Minds. The Cold War was a war fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. The US and the Soviet Union used propaganda as a primary tool in their ideological battle. The key strategy was simple: shape the hearts and minds of the public, both at home and abroad. For decades, the two superpowers engaged in a global struggle for influence, using media to broadcast their values and demonize the other side. The US government recognized early on that controlling information was critical. The CIA funded programs like the Voice of America radio broadcasts, which sought to promote democracy and capitalism. These broadcasts were aimed at the Soviet bloc, offering an alternative narrative to the heavily controlled Soviet media. Hollywood also played a significant role in Cold War propaganda. Films like Rocky IV and Dr. Strangelove shaped American perceptions of the Soviet Union, often portraying them as evil, backwards, or incompetent. The American film industry became a key player in spreading anti-Soviet sentiment, with the idea of the American dream presented as the ultimate goal. On the other side, the Soviet Union had its own tools for propaganda. Soviet leaders, including Nikita Khrushchev, used radio and television broadcasts to promote Marxism-Leninism and criticize Western capitalist societies. The USSR also controlled every aspect of the media, from newspapers to television, creating a unified narrative that painted the West as corrupt and imperialistic. In addition to media, the Soviet Union used art as a tool of political propaganda. Socialist realism, a style of art that emphasized the triumph of socialism, was promoted across the USSR. Paintings, sculptures, and posters glorified workers and soldiers, presenting them as the true heroes of the Soviet system. The idea was to create a visual culture that reinforced the superiority of the Soviet Union. At the same time, the US also engaged in cultural diplomacy, promoting jazz, art, and literature as examples of American freedom. The US sent cultural ambassadors to the Soviet Union, hoping to show the world that America was a land of creative freedom, in contrast to the rigid censorship of the USSR. One of the most significant propaganda campaigns during the Cold War was the space race. Both the US and the Soviet Union used their achievements in space to show the superiority of their respective systems. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, in 1957, it sent shockwaves through the West. In response, the US ramped up its own space program, ultimately landing on the Moon in 1969, a victory celebrated as a triumph of American capitalism and ingenuity. The Cold War propaganda battle didn't end with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Even after the Soviet Union collapsed, the remnants of these ideological campaigns continued to influence global politics. In many ways, the fight for hearts and minds during the Cold War helped shape the media landscape we see today. Chapter 6: Modern Propaganda, Social Media, Fake News, and the Digital Age. The digital age has brought about a new era of propaganda, one that moves at the speed of light and reaches billions of people instantly. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have become powerful tools for shaping public opinion. In today's world, propaganda doesn't just come from governments or organizations, it can be created and spread by anyone with access to the internet. One of the most significant changes in modern propaganda is the rise of fake news. In the 2016 US presidential election, for example, false information spread like wildfire across social media. Studies showed that fake news stories were more likely to be shared than real news. A study by MIT found that false stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted than true ones. This shows just how easy it is for misinformation to spread in today's digital environment. Social media algorithms also play a significant role in spreading propaganda. Platforms like Facebook and YouTube use algorithms that prioritize content that generates the most engagement. This often means that sensationalist, emotionally charged content is amplified, while more thoughtful, nuanced discussions are buried. As a result, people are often exposed to a narrow range of ideas that reinforce their existing beliefs, creating echo chambers. Governments around the world have also recognized the power of social media as a tool for propaganda. In countries like Russia and China, state-sponsored media outlets and social media bots are used to spread disinformation and manipulate public opinion. In Russia, for example, the Internet Research Agency has been accused of using fake social media accounts to influence elections in the US and Europe. But it's not just foreign governments engaging in digital manipulation. Political campaigns in democracies have also embraced the power of digital tools to shape public opinion. In the US, both the 2016 and 2020 elections saw extensive use of micro-targeting, ads tailored to individual users based on their interests and online behaviors. These ads were designed to sway undecided voters and mobilize specific groups. The digital age has also made it easier for individuals and groups to create their own propaganda. Memes, viral videos, and manipulated images can be spread in seconds, allowing anyone to influence public opinion. The weaponization of social media has created new challenges for politicians, journalists, and citizens alike, as the line between fact and fiction becomes increasingly blurred. Propaganda in the digital age is more subtle, and often harder to detect, than ever before. In many cases, the goal is not to persuade the public with clear lies but to create confusion, division, and doubt. The rise of deepfake technology, which can create realistic videos of people saying things they never actually said, adds a whole new level of danger to digital propaganda. In today's world, the battle for control of information is constant and evolving. As the digital landscape continues to grow, the ability to influence people's opinions and beliefs has never been more powerful or more dangerous. What's clear is that propaganda is no longer a tool of governments alone, it's now a part of everyday life, shaping how we see the world and each other. The evolution of propaganda from ancient times to the present day shows just how far-reaching and influential the strategies of persuasion can be. From the early days of monumental art to the spread of misinformation on social media, propaganda has always been a tool of power, shaping how we think, act, and interact with the world around us.